the time, telling everybody what time it is that they're supposed to join. I think we have such a wide continent and 4 time zones. That has been very, very helpful in telling people exactly when to join. And I think going forward, we shall have more participation as a result. I want to invite all of us for coming to this meeting, just to thank you and basically just
well, I think we lost. Let's wait there for reconnect. Just a second. She's writing me. She's connecting again. Yes, she's back. And I think we got some connection issues. See, you're back. Can you hear me? Anne? Yes. Okay.
sorry.
Please,
Okay.
no worries. You can continue.
Yes, I was in the process of welcoming everybody back to this year. We've not had any meeting, and it's a very warm welcome for everyone. This is a very important meeting for us to see how we can engage GEF and in getting some project going on the continent. Of course, as going forward, you try to focus on what is relevant for your region and your country. And we want to thank Filippo so much for organizing this for us. We realized we were kind of in the middle of coming to the end of the funding phase, and this is a very necessary.
Yeah, I think the assembly need 9.
So thank you. Please go ahead, and I want to give it back to Filippo. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anne. Thanks for staying with us. So as you may recall, last year, the colleagues who were formerly coordinating the region organized another webinar on resource mobilization. So this is part of the same idea. So we really would like to match your request to build the capacity, the local capacity to approach donors and to engage in these kind of programs and so on. So again, this session will be implemented in French and Portuguese, hopefully in May, somewhere in May. And in case you have any other requests in terms of webinars or on topics you would like to cover to build your capacity to mobilize resources, please contact me and we can move forward on that. We will also soon share with you some information about the next African Soil Partnership annual meeting. I will talk with Anne soon to define the agenda and the other members of the steering committee as well to contribute. But now, without any further ado, let's go to the core of this session, and I will give the floor to Mr. Pierre Bégat from the FAO GEF Coordination Unit, also from the OCB division. So thanks again for staying with us and for sharing your presentation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Filippo, and good afternoon, colleagues, everybody across Africa. My name is Pierre Bégat, and I worked at the GEF Coordination Unit in FAO headquarters in Rome, and I focus, along with a couple of colleagues, on the FAO GEF Africa portfolio.
Sorry, Pierre, I think you have 2 screens. You should swap the basculer les affichages. Is the commander, because we see the framework instead of the big screen.
All right.
I don't know. It's like normally it's on the upper left corner. You see that we have the 2 arrows normally. We say basculer and les affichages.
Okay, let me
on
check.
The left.
I can't see that because I'm not working from my own laptop. So
on the upper left corner, I can see from here. It's like when you see
this one. This one, no, that's not one.
Yeah, on the left.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, on the PowerPoint. Is it
Okay, good. Perfect.
good?
Thanks.
All right. Thank you for having me. So the idea is to give you a bit of a quick understanding of what the GEF is and what the GEF can do as a funding opportunity to support your work and to support soil health more generally in Africa through projects and programs. So I'm not sure what is the average level of familiarity in the room this afternoon about the GEF. So we'll assume that it is very limited and just maybe starts from the basics. Just to first tell you what the GEF is. So the GEF stands for the Global Environment Facility. And it is basically the main financial mechanism for 5 main environmental conventions. So the 3 Rio conventions, UNFCCC on climate change, the UNCCD, so the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, the UNCBD, United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, plus 2 chemicals-focused conventions, so Stockholm and Minamata. This Global Environment Facility, GEF, is governed by an assembly that meets every 4 years and a council, which represents basically the donor members, donor countries, and beneficiary countries. And the way the GEF operates is as a vertical fund is through a network of 18 GEF agencies, so including ourselves, FAO, along with 17 others, which are mostly UN agencies, large international NGOs, and a number of financial institutions, development banks, either regional or global development banks. So in Africa, for instance, the West African Development Bank is an accredited GEF agency, and so is the African Development Bank, and I believe also DBSA, the Development Bank of South Africa or Southern Africa. And the way GEF agencies operate in what they call the overall GEF partnership is that the GEF relies on agencies to work directly with beneficiary countries to develop project proposals and then oversee the implementation of the projects once they are approved by the GEF. So this is the overall, let's say, framework presentation of the GEF. Now, as Filippo mentioned in his introduction, the GEF is currently at its 8th replenishment cycle. A replenishment cycle lasts 4 years in the GEF world. And as you can see on this graph, the expectations are really high and the hopes are really high for this current GEF-8 cycle because replenishment hit a record funding of around $7 billion US. And this is for the period 2022-2026. So roughly $7 billion to be committed towards projects that will address the main priorities identified by the global community under the 5 conventions that I mentioned previously. Focusing now a bit more on Africa, as this is our main focus for today. So the GEF-8 replenishment is a great opportunity for globally, but in particular for sub-Saharan Africa. And you can see on this graph how the new GEF-8 allocation compares against the previous GEF-7 allocation for the 5 main geographies, target geographies that the GEF is supporting. And you can see that the increase is the highest for sub-Saharan Africa. So there are many opportunities to come up with new project, new programming under GEF-8. And you can see in the title of this graph, so this describes not only the core GEF allocation, what we call the GEF STAR allocation. And STAR stands for System for the Transparent Allocation of Resources. And also what we call the LDCF, the Least Developed Country Fund, which is another funding window that is administered by the GEF, and that focuses on the so-called least developed countries to fund interventions about climate change adaptation, more specifically. So now diving a bit more into what the GEF can fund. So the GEF funding priorities are described in a core document that's called the GEF-8 Programming Directions, and it's generally structured around 5 focal areas that you have here on the screen: biodiversity, climate change mitigation, land degradation, international waters, and climate change adaptation. Actually, I should have added chemicals, which is a bit different. I will not go through into detail in the description of the 5 or even the 6 focal areas, but I just want to highlight a number of relevant entry points or a number of programming priorities for the GEF that are relevant to soil health. And starting with perhaps the most relevant of those focal areas, which is land degradation. So under land degradation, under the land degradation focal area, projects can address or should address issues linked with sustainable land management, landscape restoration, desertification and drought, most importantly in dry land areas, and overall land degradation neutrality. So any project that applies for funding under the land degradation focal area to the GEF is expected to work on one or a combination of those intervention areas that you have on the screen. Now, other focal areas can also be relevant to soil health. For instance, if you look at climate change adaptation, the climate change adaptation focal area, this is really a cross-cutting theme that can talk to agriculture, water, nature-based solution, and all these themes are of course relevant to soil health, or rather soil health should be a core component of any of those thematics under climate change adaptation. Biodiversity to some extent can also be very relevant when you talk about agrobiodiversity, for instance. So how to mainstream biodiversity within productive landscapes. The genetic resource sharing as well. Those can be topics that can be invested in under the GEF, under the biodiversity focal area as well. Now, projects under the GEF can either be funded under focal areas. Those are what we call standalone projects. And this is the way the GEF has been working mostly for the, let's say, the 5 first replenishment cycles. But from the 6th cycle onwards, and now culminating with the 8th cycle, the GEF is also wanting to focus on what they call integrated programs. So integrated programs is a way to program projects under a specific thematic that cuts across a number of focal areas. So what you have listed here on the screen are the 11 integrated programs that were that are part of the GEF-8 architecture. And you can see that they tackle some of the key priorities in the global environmental agenda, as we can say. So just to name a few: food systems, ecosystem restoration, sustainable cities. All these programs should draw resources from the 5 focal, or at least one or more focal areas to address issues that are specific to, let's say, sustainable cities, for instance. And what I have put or emphasized in bold in this list of integrated programs are the integrated programs which are perhaps the most relevant to soil health. So food systems looks at addressing the negative environmental impacts of global food systems in developing countries. So of course, agriculture will be is a part, an integral part of the food systems integrated program. So how do we address soil health as a key component of the environmental impact of agriculture in the food systems? I highlighted food systems here also because FAO is the lead agency, the lead GEF agency for the food systems integrated program, together with IPAD. So for the next 4 years. Ecosystem restoration is another catalytic integrated program for soil health. Ecosystem restoration looks at interventions that consider degraded ecosystems, be they like grasslands, productive ecosystems. What I mean is like cropland, or even forested ecosystem, and to undertake to restore them and plan for the sustainable management of these ecosystems. Again, soil health can be an important aspect of these projects. There is a specific integrated program on what GEF calls critical forest biomes. There are 5 of them, including 2 in Africa, so the Congo Basin, but also the primary Guinean forest. Those are 2 critical forest biomes that are targeted under this integrated program, which again, soil health can be part of. And Blue and Green Islands really looks at seeds, at small island developing states, and try to address in environmental impacts in a holistic manner in those states. Of course, there are several seeds in Africa that can and have applied to projects under this funding opportunity. Cabo Verde, Mauritius, the Seychelles, they have applied. Sao Tome also can apply for this funding window. Let me perhaps stop there for this first session. This is a very broad overview of how the GEF works. I think we'll have a Q&A. I will come back on some of these points later in the subsequent presentations, and we have Q&A session at the end. So happy to come back to any of those points later. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pierre. Again, I would suggest to keep all the questions for the question and answer sessions at the end of the webinar. Still, I think in case there are questions you would like to be addressed directly by Pierre, you may share them already in the chat. Maybe we'll try to cover them to save some time. But again, we will open the floor at the end. So in case you want to share any questions, you can do through the chat in the meantime. Now I will give the floor to my colleague Maria Ferro Vazquez from the Global Soil Partnership Secretariat. She will talk a little bit more about soil and sustainable soil management and GEF. So how to link, let's say, the activities we are doing within the African Soil Partnership, the activities that you are doing within your countries, and the potential actions within the GEF framework that Pierre just presented. So Maria, over to you.
Thanks, Filippo. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Cruz Ferro Vazquez, and I'm a consultant in the Global Soil Partnership Secretariat, dealing with sustainable soil management and also with the integration of our tools from the GSP into these GEF projects. So hope that you can see my screen in presentation mode. I want to thank also Pierre for the introduction, this very good introduction on the GEF-8 program. So my work has been done much more easy. And yes, so my task is presenting on the links between the GEF programming directions, the GEF-8 programming directions, and soils and sustainable soil management, including the available GSP tools for facilitating a good project performance on that aspects that Pierre was highlighting, these environmental issues. And I will use also some examples from the previous replenishment cycle, the GEF-7, on how these tools and these GSP programs and initiatives can be included in projects. So, okay. So this is a summary of the GEF-8 programming directions. As you can see, there's the five focal areas that Pierre was talking about, although he split it climate change 1 and 2 in adaptation and mitigation. And also transversally to these focal areas, we have the integrated programming, meaning that all these integrated programs are or deal with several aspects covered also by the different focal areas. So we think, and although soils can be relevant for almost any focal area and almost any integrated program, there's 3 focal areas that are specifically and more directly related to soil aspects, which are land degradation, climate change, and biodiversity. Land degradation, well, you can see down in the lower part of the table, you can see the indicators, the global benefits that are expected from the projects that are related with each one of these focal areas, and also the indicators that are used for evaluating performance. So let's start, as Pierre was saying, the most obvious focal area, the most related one to soils and soil management is the land degradation focal area. So its goal is contribute to arrest and reverse current global trends in land degradation due to desertification and deforestation primarily. And the global benefit that is expected from implementation is sustainable land management, with an indicator, the chosen indicator for evaluating performance is the amount of hectares, so the area under sustainable land management when the project finishes. So this focal area will fund actions addressed to avoid or reduce desertification and land degradation, but using the hierarchy of response set in the UNCCD 2018-2030 strategy of avoiding, reducing, and reversing land degradation. So first, we try to avoid, then we try to reduce, and last, if we couldn't avoid and reduce, we try to reverse degraded lands. And all this through sustainable land management. Resources will also support the implementation of the land degradation neutrality approach that is a framework for quantifying the amount of land that is degraded over the total extension of a country, and has 3 sub-indicators. The first one is productivity, the second is land cover, and last, soil organic carbon. So it is obvious that this focal area of land degradation requires soil information for being implemented. Yeah, so we are now only with an overview, then I will use some examples of how to use soil information in this approach. So moving then to the climate change focal area, this area has a goal of supporting transformational shifts toward net zero greenhouse gas emissions and for climate resilient development pathways. So the indicators that are chosen for performance are emissions of carbon or other greenhouse gases, but expressed as carbon or CO2 tons that are avoided, or the carbon stocks that are preserved, or the carbon that is sequestered from atmospheres. So soil can contribute to reduce or avoid emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases through soil recarbonization. Probably all the people that are participating in this webinar have heard about that as in your role of focal points of the Global Soil Partnership. And this is particularly important in agricultural lands. So soil stocks must be accounted for in inventories of forest carbon stocks and of course in any calculation of land-based carbon sequestration. An appropriate soil organic carbon monitoring is then essential for evaluating the benefits in this focal area. In particular, also this focal area mentions the implementation of mitigation options as aligned as possible with the Coronibia Joint Work on Agriculture. So actions that lead to that outcomes are also funded under this focal area. Then we have the biodiversity focal area. So this has the goal of globally having globally significant biodiversity conserved and sustainably used and restored. Again, the metric that is used for evaluation is the hectares of area protected. And this focal area is funding actions that improve conservation, sustainable use, and restoration of natural ecosystem. Also for implementing the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety and the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing of genetic resources. Also, this area has also a provision of funds for helping to the mobilization of domestic resources for biodiversity issues. So how can all this be linked to soils and to soil sustainable management and to the GSP activity? So let's start having a look on the new GSP action framework that was approved last year by the GSP Plenary Assembly. So probably all of you know this already, the action framework. So I don't need to say that it was set a goal within this framework for the next 8 years of maintaining or improving the health of 50% of the planet's soils through sustainable soil management, which is quite an ambitious goal. The action framework includes 6 priority areas to be achieved through various activities and initiatives, including targets and indicators to assess the real impact of the partnership on global soils. Importantly, the global challenges considered in the GSP action framework map directly into GEF programming. So see the yellow box. It highlights the global challenges that are included in the GSP action framework, and we can see climate change, biodiversity loss, land degradation, and others that also are mapped into the GEF-8 programming, but less directly. So initiatives and programs under this action framework are multiple. They are highlighted in the red boxes, and are in relation to the 6 action areas. So how can we use all these tools? So implementation of sustainable soil management practices, the SoilLex platform, the Edu Soils, how can all of these multiple tools, how can we use them for GEF-funded projects, and how can they be integrated for contributing to the objectives of the focal areas and to provide global benefits? For answering that question, let's first have a look on the structure and content of GEF projects, and then I will show some examples. So typically, the GEF projects have a structure in components. Each component has an outcome, several outputs, and some related indicators. But components are normally split in themes. So usually there's one component on creating an enabling environment for achieving the goals of a specific focal area. And this enabling environment component usually includes a capacity development component and also policy and institutional frameworks. So improving policy and institutional and law frameworks for allowing, for enabling these global benefits to be achieved. Then a second component that can be just one or several is field implementation of sustainable soil management, sustainable land management, and sustainable forest management, including field tasks. So actually implementation in pilot sites, or also when the project is based on previous experiences, on upscaling practices that have already been proved to be useful. A third theme or subject covered by the GEF projects typically is the knowledge management component, including dissemination of the results, outreach, and awareness raising in the population, in order to then facilitate that these results are widely used. And last, projects have to include a project monitoring and evaluation component. So let's use some examples. So I chose from the GEF website that has a list of all the projects that have been funded. I just chose 3 projects in Africa, one for the land degradation focal area, another one for the climate change, and another one for the biodiversity focal area. So the areas that are more related with soils. And this first example is on the land degradation focal area, and is sustainable land management to strengthen social cohesion in the drylands of Burkina Faso. So this project has 4 components. The first one is national level framework practices and capacities for the effective application of the LDN at landscape level enhanced. So you can see that the LDN approach is being implemented with this project, and this first component deals with providing the capacities, providing the enabling environment for achieving it. Second component is about implementation, as I was saying. So gender sensitive and locally adapted solutions and practices that contribute to LDN targets. And indicators are related with area of land restored and their improved management and their extensive collaborative management to avoid degradation. And then we have also a second indicator, that is the status and trends, so the results of the LDN project process, how they evolve, and the trends that are being detected in land degradation neutrality in the framework. So the third component is a legal, policy, institutional, and financial barriers for the continued application of gender-sensitive LDN at the landscape level, and indicators the adoption of conductive policies supporting LDN frameworks. This third component could be also understood as an enabling environment component. And fourth, a monitoring and evaluation and knowledge management, as we were saying, these other 2 parts that are normally included in GEF projects. So highlighted in red are the things where I think that the GSP tools can be most useful. So for the first component, first of all, we need to have, for having an enabling environment for implementing the LDN framework, we need to have, first of all, data, and we need to have a setting that allows the stakeholders to actually understand how to address the LDN process. So the indicators for this component are improved capacity of stakeholders at national level, and also strengthening national monitoring, reporting, and verification systems for climate with the outputs of the LDN process. So the availability of accurate soil data at an adequate scale is actually a need for reliable and accurate reporting of stocks within the land degradation neutrality program, and also for this monitoring, reporting, and verification systems for climate. No? However, it is common that national soil information is not available, or it exists, but is usually fragmented between different departments, or areas is not accessible for being used for these objectives. So the LDN reporting system, as is organized now, it is called PRICE 4. It was the last reporting cycle that is ending now. Allows for the countries to adopt a default method for reporting soil organic carbon within the LDN framework. And this default method is based on changes of soil organic carbon stock due to land use. So this default form of reporting organic carbon is actually normally of insufficient resolution for the local scale, and so it's invalid for project effects monitoring, and does not account for shock changes due to land management. So this method has not into account if land or soil management is sustainable or not. And this is in contradiction with the objectives of the GEF land degradation focal area and with the sustainable land management approach in general terms. So the recommendation is, when possible, to avoid the default method of SOC reporting and use other sources of soil data. So global products and SOC, so there's global maps available on soil organic carbon stocks that can be used, but many of them are also based on remote sensing or modeled from only a few data points per country. So the accuracy and resolution are not enough for a realistic reporting of LDN. In contrast, we have the GSP Global Soil Organic Map, which is based on a bottom-up approach in which the countries provide their national data, which are then harmonized and modeled for obtaining the national soil organic carbon maps that will form the global soil organic carbon map. When no national data are available, the GSP approach is modeling the gaps using the information that is available from other countries and for similar settings, and also, and very important, supporting countries to set a national soil monitoring system and provide the capacities for producing their national soil organic carbon stocks maps. Then the maps can be made available through the creation of national soil information systems. So all the stakeholders in the country can have access to them. Although, of course, the data that are shared in each country are of course decided by the country's authorities. And the global products produced by the GSP with all that inputs are published in open access in the Global Soil Information System data infrastructure, the GLOSIS, which brings together the soil information collected by all the contributing institutions. So this improved form of producing global maps and national scale maps is much more useful in terms of providing information that can be actually used for reporting accurately on the LDN. So having these soil information systems in place and having this soil organic carbon data in place is actually a requirement for then being able of reporting. So that's why this product, this activity of the GSP is included in the enabling environment because it enables the stakeholders to report accurately. Then component 2 is more about implementation. The indicator chosen within this project for this component, and which is also a typical choice in land degradation projects, is the area of restored lands or area under improved management that avoids land degradation. So the thing is, we have this assessment of LDN, so an assessment on how much land is degraded in our country, and we want to restore lands or improve their management. So we choose practices that we think that are sustainable and implement the practices in pilot sites. But we have a problem. How do we know that we are actually doing good? So how do we know that we are contributing to restore lands and to avoid land degradation? So this needs to be measured, and a monitoring system is needed for that. And something that also I want to stress is that although the land degradation focal area projects are focused in LDN aspects, there's a need to go beyond the land degradation neutrality reporting. So the real ultimate objective of all the reporting exercise is to assist countries to care about their soils and their lands because of the benefits for the country itself. So environmental quality, sustained availability of resources, food security, etc. And also because of the global benefits that we were talking minutes ago of reducing the greenhouse gases, enhancing biodiversity, and avoiding pollution, among others. So we need to measure the effects of the activities we are implementing in that terms, not only for producing data for LDN reporting, but also for caring for soil health and for sustainable land management. So the GSP has put together the protocol for the assessment of sustainable soil management. That is what you have in the screen. It consists of advice for systematically monitoring soil health through the measurement of 4 indicators: productivity, soil organic carbon, bulk density, and soil respiration rate, that inform on production and chemical and physical and biological properties of soils. The methods for measuring these indicators have been standardized by the Global Soil Laboratory Network and are published as standard operation procedures. In addition, there's some additional indicators that you can see in the right of your screen that are proposed in order to evaluate how management practices are performing in relation to specific soil threats that may be already known. Also the protocol can be useful within component 4 for monitoring and evaluating the effects of the project. So it's not only about implementation itself, but it's also about monitoring and evaluation, and also knowledge management for upscaling. So monitoring requires an analytical capacity. So we have the Global Soil Laboratory Network that has the mission of strengthening the performance of laboratories through the use of standardized methods and analytical protocols. The African branch of GLOSOLAN is the AfriLab, which was established in 2019 and currently counts with 180 laboratories in 40 African countries. So by joining AfriLab, the national laboratories will benefit from capacity development programs, and will get the on-demand assistance with procurement processes, and will get access to analytical proficiency essays that are organized yearly, so the labs can know how good they are performing in analytical terms. So it's a very good assistance in project execution, because knowing the reliability of data is absolutely paramount for knowing actually if the project is performing correctly. Importantly, all this cannot be just a one-time effort. This has to be integrated in national ways of doing. So as a national monitoring system that can keep feeding the soil information system and can be producing information for reporting to LDN, and also for knowing how how are we improving soils with our actions within projects. All this that I've just told has to be necessarily underpinned by capacity development actions in relation to all the components of that we have mentioned. So there's, as I already mentioned, there's the GSP has programs in place, and also provides ad hoc online and on-site training on implementing GSP tools and programs. And capacity development, of course, is necessary for monitoring aspects of the project, so in component 2, but it can also be included as part of the creation on an enabling environment, so could be also in this particular project included in component 1. Regarding capacity development within component 2, one of the project performance indicators that is included is the number of beneficiaries, and includes also building capacities within national extension services and among householders. So in this regard, I want to highlight the Soil Doctors Program that the GSP has in place, which is a very useful and, if I'm allowed to say, successful tool that consists of a farmer-to-farmer training initiative. It is implemented in collaboration with local institutions that are the promoters. And the promoters have the task of selecting groups of farmers that will be attending training sessions that will lead to their certification as soil doctor. Then the certified soil doctors will be in the capacity of training other farmers or producers in their communities, creating this way a sustainable community-based extension service that is independent from external funding. Training is supported by educational modules and field materials that can be adapted to the project needs. And the Soil Doctor program is also very useful within the implementation component of projects that aim the upscaling of best practices because of this exponential expansion of knowledge on soils. And it can also be implemented in synergy with the FAO farmer field schools. In relation with the component 3 of the project that deals with legal, policy, institutional, and financial barriers for the continued application of LDN at the landscape level, the indicator of performance is the adoption of conductive policies supporting LDN frameworks. And in order to support this task, the task of creating new policies and new law frameworks, the GSP provides assistance through its policy documents, the revised World Soil Charter, the voluntary guidelines of sustainable soil management, and the International Code of Conduct for Fertilizer Use, in addition to the SoilX platform, which is a repository of soil-related legal instruments that the users can search and download in order to provide comparative input for policy and law formulation. So, this was for the land degradation focal area. So I'm going to go faster now. This is an example of the climate change focal area. The enabling environment component, the tools that can be used in the enabling environment component are mostly the same. So I'm going to jump straight to the component 2 and 3 that are in relation to implementation. And I want to highlight here what I was saying before, that organic carbon is a sink, is a very large sink of carbon from atmosphere through carbon sequestration, and is the largest carbon pool in terrestrial ecosystems. And it has been demonstrated that through sustainable soil management, greenhouse gas emissions can be mitigated in a very cost-effective way. So our proposal from GSP is introducing this carbon sequestration, what we have called recarbonization of soils, into these focal area projects that for achieving the global benefits. So for knowing how much carbon we can store in soils, we can sequester in soils, the GSP has this tool, which is the Global Soil Organic Carbon Sequestration Map. That is a modeling effort that allows for the estimation of topsoil soil organic carbon sequestration potential under different scenarios, 4 different scenarios of management. One is business as usual, and then 3 different scenarios of sustainable soil management that involve different inputs of organic matter. This map, this GSOC map, can be used as individually as a planning tool for knowing how much and where can soil organic carbon be sequestered. And this can be used for land planning, for climate adaptation or mitigation. And is also useful for the LDN target setting and reporting process. So for example, here you have an example of different amounts of carbon sequestered by different countries, depending on the scenario that we are considering. So the green one is the SSM3, which is let's say the best scenario, against the gray one that is the business as usual. So the amount of carbon that is sequestered in the SSM3, the best scenario, is much higher, is more than 4 times the amount without sustainable soil management practices. We can see in the right part of the screen also that we can use this tool for knowing how much carbon can be stored in different land uses, under different land uses. So this can then be useful for implementing approaches in specific parts of the landscape. So this was using this tool individually, but we can use also this tool within the REC-Soil toolkit, what we call the REC-Soil toolkit. REC-Soil is a mechanism that the GSP has put together for scaling up sustainable soil management with a focus on soil organic carbon sequestration and recarbonization of soils. The priorities of the REC-Soil program are to prevent future shock losses and increase stock stocks, improve farmers' incomes, and contribute to food security. So this is an example. So there are several initiatives, REC-Soil initiatives in Africa starting now, but they are starting. So I don't have the maps for showing to you. So I'm using here an example from Mexico, in which climatic, several different maps of ancillary information have been used together with the carbon national map for defining different clusters in which adaptation or mitigation strategies are best fit for actually managing that landscape. And then these areas, these clusters, can be split in different plots, implementing practices depending on the actual crops or depending on the actual needs of the population there. Sorry. So the REC-Soil program has 2 paths. One is the green, what we call the green path, and another one is the carbon credits path.
Sorry, Cruz, we're going too much, a little bit late. So maybe you can move to because we have to skip to the next item soon.
Sure. I'm
sorry.
Now. Well, thanks. So yeah, what I wanted to highlight here is that the farmers get incentives for sustainable soil management. Then the biodiversity focal area example. I want to highlight this useful tool, which is the International Network on Soil Biodiversity. The institutions of the countries can join the network and work in the working groups for working on measurement, assessment, and monitoring of biodiversity, or on sustainable use, management, and conservation, on economics of biodiversity, or on policies or legal instruments in relation to that. GSP has also other technical networks in other topics. You can access the information on them in the Global Soil Partnership website. And last, I would like to highlight the use of all these tools, as they are related with the three focal areas that we have been talking about. They also contribute to any of these integrated programming that are problem-oriented, that are more oriented to a specific object. So food systems is an object that is related with all the areas. And in addition to the areas that the integrated programs that Pierre highlighted before, I want to also tell about the Net Zero Nature Positive Accelerator Integrated Program, which is the one more related perhaps with climate change, and is the one more related with the recarbonization of soils and with this REC soil program. Thank you very much. That's all. Sorry, Filippo and everybody for taking more time than planned. Yeah, over to you, Filippo. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks, Cruz. Sorry for interrupting you, but
That's fine.
I mean, these of course are very key elements for the formulation of the project and for the overall overview of the potential components. And so, so thanks for sharing all the detailed informations. I think most of the focal points are familiar with the GSP technical networks and activities, especially regarding mapping. But in case of questions, please do not hesitate to contact us, and we can try to give you some more details on that. Now we'll give the floor back to Mr. Bégat for to talk about funding bits. Indeed, I see the presentation already there. So over to you, Pierre. So you can talk us, explain us a little bit more about how the project design works.
Thank you. Sure. Can you see the right screen now? Do I need to switch?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, good. Thank you. So in case you were not convinced, I think Maya convinced you that soil health is an important thing that can be mainstreamed into GEF programming. Now, you know you want to do it. Now, how do you get the money? How do you get there? So I'm not going to give you a crash course in GEF project design because agencies are actually there to service and to support the countries to do that. But let me still give you an overview of what the project design cycle looks like for a couple of cases. So the most common case is the one of full-size project. Full-size project being a project above $2 million US. So the way it works is that first a country develops what we call a PIF in the GEF jargon. So PIF stands for Project Identification Form, which is basically a concept note, if you will. So this will be developed typically by the project proponents. So it could be the country, a ministry, it could be an agency, it could be a collective effort. And this, once it is ready, this concept note or this PIF will be submitted to the GEF. Once the GEF receives it, it starts a dialogue with the GEF agency to ensure that the concept note is technically sound. So there can be a back and forth exchanges with the GEF Secretariat to make sure to revise the concept note and to make sure that it aligns with the GEF programming directions that we discussed earlier on. Now you have a PIF, you have a concept note. The concept note has been cleared technically by the GEF Secretariat. Then the GEF Secretariat recommends this concept note for consideration by the GEF Council. And the GEF Council is a body of donor countries and beneficiary countries that meets twice a year, once in June, once in December, at set dates. And that basically endorses what they call the work program. The work program is basically a list of projects that have been technically cleared by the GEF Secretariat, and that the Council recommends that the GEF funds for clears for the next stage, and basically sets funding aside for this project. So typically the next GEF Council would be this coming June. Once PIF or concept note has been cleared by or endorsed by the council, then you start what the GEF calls the PPG phase, the project preparation grants phase, which is basically a full formulation phase that can last up to 12 months. The GEF will typically give grants a bit of money to the GEF agency in the country to carry out any feasibility study that may be required to develop a full-fledged project document. So this should be an extensive document, typically like 200-page long, with any type of detail that the project execution team will then need to execute the project. So a list of activities, technical orientation, list of tools to be used, typically the tools that Maria presented just now. These could be described in the project document, and so on and so forth. Of course, the institutional framework, the institutional arrangement for the execution of the project would be also described in the project document. So you have 12 months to do that. Once you have a full project document, you submit it to the GEF Secretariat. I mean, the agency submits it to the GEF Secretariat on behalf of the country. And then similarly, same as with the PIF or the concept note, there is a back and forth game, exchanges with the GEF Secretariat to make sure that the project document is up to standards, that it is technically sound, and can then be cleared by the GEF Secretariat and endorsed by the Chief Executive Officer of the GEF. So this is the last stage of the formulation phase that we have here, the CO endorsement. So typically, all in all, a full-size project can take, should take around, let's say, typically, 14, 15 months from conceptualization phase to endorsement by the GEF. Then it can be a bit longer, depends how long it takes to develop a very sound concept at the beginning. It depends also how long it takes to agree with, for the GEF Secretariat to agree on the soundness of your project proposal. So this is what it looks like for a project up to $2 million. And then there is a kind of shorter cycle for projects of a bit more modest size, so what they call medium-sized projects below $2 million. And you can see on the screen that the various periods are shortened somehow. So typically, the full cycle can be 12 months, for instance. You should understand also that it can be much quicker. So typically, if a project has been really well conceptualized because there's been some prior exchanges and consultations, and some of the technical packages are already ready, then the 8 months, typically in the case of a medium-sized project, they don't have to be used up. Could be much quicker. So this is so you can see that it's not an overnight effort having a GEF project identified, formulated, and approved. It takes a bit of time, takes a bit of resources. Well, hopefully the GEF, thankfully the GEF provides some resources for the formulation phase. But for the initial identification phase, then the agencies and the countries need to use their own resources to support this stage. this is just a couple of points on. So what we discussed, this is very a generic context. Now, just to give you some insights on what a regional project, original programming around soil health can look like. The GEF also welcomes projects that are multinational projects, or international projects. So you can and there is already soil health can be embedded in international, regional, global projects, programs. This can take the form of countries pooling their allocation, the GEF allocation together, but also there are options that are a bit different. They called the land degradation focal area set aside, which is money that's not it's in a separate pot, if you will. It's not given directly to the countries, but it's managed by the GEF Secretariat, and agencies can come to the GEF Secretariat with an idea of a multinational project and discuss with the GEF on whether they'd be interested in investing into such a project. So an activity that can be eligible for GEF projects around soil health, capacity development, networking, change, enabling environments, as Maya mentioned, demonstration plots or sites, to some extent equipping labs, to some extent conducting studies. What's not eligible is hiring of staff for under GEF project. You can hire consultants for specific missions, for specific activities, but the GEF money cannot be used to staff up any institution, really. It's not only laboratories or research centers, but any type of institution. They cannot use that to do cost recovery either. Those are the limits of their funding. And I want to, before I tell you a bit about FAO's portfolio, GEF portfolio in Africa, I want to respond. I think it makes sense to do it now to a comment or question received in the chat from Patrick from Eswatini, who's asking, well, how do we engage as GSP focal point in the country, or really as any stakeholder who has an interest in supporting the formulation of a GEF project on soil, but on anything really? Well, there are a number of different cases. So either in the case of Eswatini, Patrick mentioned that he's aware that Eswatini has already started to formulate a project, a GEF project, actually with FAO under the Food Systems Integrated Program. So in this case, what I would recommend is to get in touch with the GEF agency that you know is supporting your government with the project formulation process. So in this case, it is FAO. FAO supported Eswatini to develop, is supporting Eswatini to develop this project. So I would recommend Patrick to either get in touch with me here at the FAO HQ, the GEF Coordination Unit. But of course, also you can reach out to the Eswatini FAO country office, and we all work as a team. The country office, the regional and sub-regional office that we have, that FAO has in Africa, and FAO headquarters, GEF Coordination Unit. So we all work together to support the development of projects. So this is one option when you know that there is a project in the pipeline and you know who's working on it. Another option, either because if you don't know, you know that something is ongoing, but you're not sure who is involved, or because that you already maybe have a project idea that you like to pitch to your country, and you're wondering whether it could be eligible for a GEF financing, and whether it can be supported by your country. My suggestion would be to reach out to, well, again, either a GEF agency, well, FAO, of course, would be very well placed to support any type of soil-related project idea for the GEF. But you can reach out also to your GEF operational focal point. And the GEF operational focal point, or OFP, as we call them, it's one person per country who is designated by the government to the GEF as the focal point for the country. So it is the person who has the power to endorse project ideas, project concepts that are then submitted by GEF agencies to the GEF on behalf of a given country. So typically, this GEF operational focal point will sit at in the Ministry of Environment. That's most often the case. Sometimes it can be someone at the Prime Minister's office. Sometimes it can be someone in an environmental agency, public agency. So what I can do is I will paste in the chat the list of GEF operational focal points globally. So you can browse it and find for your own country who's the person to contact. And you will see that the contacts are described in this list. So those are really the two options that you have, depending on how familiar you are and with the status of the GEF pipeline in your country. Either reach out to us, FAO, myself, you have the contacts on the screen, or your FAO country office, or reach out to your GEF operational focal point. So that's for to try to answer Patrick's question, which indeed is really important. Now, let me go back quickly, because we're running out of time. Let me go back to this slide, because I want to tell you a bit about, so this is the project formulation timeline, but how does it work in practice, and when can you, as soil experts and GSP focal points, intervene to support the formulation of a given project? Well, typically, I think the best option would be during this 12-month period that you have here on the screen, which corresponds to the formulation phase of the project. So this is the phase where the project design team will be listing project activities, will be designing the logical framework and the component structure that Maria just showed you a couple of examples of earlier. And this is when you can definitely contribute to have a more technically sound project that would incorporate soil-related aspects into its logical framework and list of activities. I think this is really the best timing for you to intervene and to support a formulation phase. And now and then really it's up to you. You can make yourself known to your GEF operational focal points. And perhaps let this person know that, well, you are here, you are the GSP focal point in the country, and that you are available to support any project formulation phase that has a relevance to soil aspects in the country. And as you understand, understood sorry, by now, many projects would be relevant. So your OFP would then be able to link you up with whoever is designing a GEF project. This, I think, would be the most relevant. And this is only for the formulation phase, of course, because then you have the implementation phase. And as you understood also, there are many opportunities, many entry points for soil-related institutions and laboratories and research centers and so on, to really engage with GEF projects. And those can be discussed on a case-by-case basis, of course, depending on the nature of the project. I want to really quickly give you an idea of what the FAO GEF portfolio looks like in Africa, because then I think we need to have time for Q&A. FAO has a really prominent place in the Africa GEF portfolio globally. So this is a representation of FAO's GEF portfolio globally, and Africa is 30% of it. So we have, now as we speak, we have about 185 million worth, USD, sorry, million worth of GEF grants in Africa, with a total project portfolio value of 1.4 billion. This is counting co-financing from other initiatives. And you can see that on those graphs that this is a growing portfolio. When you compare, and a very prominent one. So when you compare the average allocation of GEF-7 money globally, and you compare it with the relative size of FAO's portfolio, FAO really has a very strong role to play in Africa, be it either under the focal area, let's say, projects on the left, or the LDCF, so the climate change adaptation focused grants also of the GEF. I think overall we have about 42 projects under implementation from FAO in Africa, so all GEF cycles combined. I think we have projects that are as old as GEF-4, perhaps, all the way to GEF-7. And now talking about the future or the present. So what's GEF-8 portfolio looking like for FAO? Well, it is still shaping up because so far there have only been 2 calls for projects under GEF-8 because GEF-8 only started in 2022. So many countries are actually still figuring out what the strategy is with relation to GEF-8, or what they want to invest in, and which agencies they want to do it. So this is just a snapshot of the projects that FAO has been submitting for GEF approval in this coming GEF Council in June. So you'll see that we have 2 standalone projects, Cabo Verde and Zambia. And then we have a number of projects under the integrated programs. So there is the Eswatini project that Patrick mentioned, a number of others. And you can see that they're quite actually, most of them would be actually relevant to soil health. So there will be ample opportunities, even under this very reduced list and tentative list, there will be opportunities to engage for sure. And this is only FAO's portfolio. There are, of course, other agencies who are working on relevant aspects. Let me stop there and perhaps give time for Q&A. Filippo, back to you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Pierre, for squeezing a bit. But thanks for providing also the review of the ongoing, at least on the proposal already submitted for approval. I think this can be also nice to have some examples on the topics that countries may focus on. I read in the chat that some people are requesting for presentation and recording. Indeed, the session is being recorded, so we will make it available together with the presentations in the following days on the African Soil Partnership webpage. But please, now we will open the floor. So as you heard, like Pierre tried to answer the question from Patrick from Eswatini, but in case there are any other questions or need for any clarification on the topics presented, please take advantage of this opportunity, because we have the chance to have with us both Pierre and Cruz, who are here to ask your questions, to support you in like better ideas on how to move forward in formulating the project and who to contact and the timeline. So any questions, please, I would really encourage you to raise your hand or write in the chat, because we have the chance now to go through this.
I have a question in the chat. Can you look at the success rate?
Let me see. I can't see it.
What has been the success rate of applicants in recent years for the GEF projects?
Should I address that, Filippo?
Yeah, I could not find in the chat, but
No, but I understand the question. So
okay,
I think
good.
you can. It's actually a good question. So it's actually it's really, really high. I think it happened once that a concept note that was submitted by FAO to the GEF was not selected. And it's, I would like to say that it is because FAO is an amazing partner and we never fail. It's actually not exactly why. The reason is because we do, we do a lot of screening of project concepts before we submit them to the GEF. So typically, if you come to us, or if a country comes to us with a project idea, then we will take the time, whatever time is required to work with the partners to come up with a very sound project idea. And it is not until we feel that we have a concept that is indeed eligible for financing that we will submit this concept. So to answer your question, once we have all agreed that a concept is up to standards, then the success rate is like 90%, 95%.
Thanks, Pierre.
Thank you very
Edward?
much.
Okay, so it answered your question. Yeah, thanks for that. I really like to stress the fact that we have like a group of skilled people, expert people that who may support you in formulating the project, in revising the project. So again, take also this as an advantage, as an opportunity to support you. So really, I would like really to invite you to start from thinking in your mind how to move forward, which ideas to focus on, so we can move forward. I really like the examples given by both Cruz and Pierre. You see, the kind of actions can include lots of partners in your countries, from laboratories to other actors dealing with ecosystem services. So I'm telling this because I know that many of the participants today are strongly linked to some laboratories. So Pierre even mentioned this in the slides, that some of the money can be even used to equip a little bit the laboratories to improve their performance. So of course, this is not, of course, the main action, but laboratories can be engaged somehow. So that can be also very interesting for many of you, I guess. There is another question from Eswatini in the chat. I don't know if you read it, Pierre. So over to you.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. So Patrick is asking about the possibility to access funding for data collection in a given country. So it is possible insofar as the data collection directly serve the overall project objective, which needs to be related to what the GEF calls global environmental benefits. So land degradation neutrality or biodiversity outcomes and so on and so forth. So what the GEF project can do is, well, indeed support monitoring efforts, data collection efforts that will then be used to support a country in achieving its commitments under, well, for instance, the UNCCD convention. That is possible. What is not possible, for instance, is to fund a countrywide data collection efforts under a project formulation phase. That is not an eligible activity.
That's clear to me. I'm asking the focal point of Eswatini, Patrick. Was it like that? Did it answer your question, or otherwise, please let us know. Is there any other question for both Cruz or Pierre? Please, really, again, take the advantage of having them. Like, don't be shy. Any questions is a good question. Cruz, yes, over to you.
Yes, I do have a question for Pierre. So if nobody else has one, I would like to ask. So we are here talking about project ideas or project proposals, but I would like you to tell us about when an idea has already been approved, where can we, or the focal points, or a person interested, and how to approach people for actually being able of including soil aspects within it when the idea has already been approved without our input, but we see a room for improvement.
There is room, definitely. So when you compare the scope of a project concept note, a PIF, as we call it, and a project document, you'll see that, I mean, it's much more detailed. The amount of information that's included in a project document is much more detailed, which means that, of course, there are things that have been conceptualized and that appear in the product that were not thought through during PIF formulation, because it was just not the right timing. We don't have the luxury of time and resources to go into full details at PIF stage. which means that typically if you feel or if you identified that a given project idea would benefit from the inclusion of soil-related activities for implementation, then by all means, please do approach the project design teams or ourselves, GEF Coordination Unit, and we can certainly, as long as it's technically sound and eligible, we can certainly accommodate some of those activities into the project document. There is some flexibility to have, let's say, adjustments between PIF and project documents. What the GEF endorses when it endorses a PIF is basically a theory of change. Larger scale indicators. This is what we commit as an agency to achieve when we submit a project concept. But in terms of pathways to achieve those larger, higher scale outcomes and indicators, then during the project formulation phase, we have a bit of leeway to adjust the way we want to reach those outcomes and indicators. So soil can certainly, be considered at this stage. So typically, I was mentioning maybe 10 projects that FAO submitted a couple of weeks ago for consideration by the GEF in June. It could be, I don't know them all, of course, by heart, but it could be that some of them would benefit indeed from additional soil angles into them. Please, if we don't reach out spontaneously, which we might do and we would like to do, please do come to us and we will work together to make sure that those aspects are captured during the project formulation phase. We can also, we can work together on a specific component. You can write a couple of activities. We work like that with technical teams, be it in HQ or in countries, depending on who has the expertise, who has the time and the willingness to contribute.
Thank you. That's useful.
Thanks. Any other question or need for clarification from the audience? I'm asking the focal points of the African Soil Partnership if there is, if you have any other questions or additional examples on how to proceed, how to start. It seems no, so maybe everything is clear. Well, again, GEF is a very good. Wait, there's another question from Patrick. So Patrick, please, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thanks, Filippo. I don't know whether this is the right platform, but I want to announce that maybe I am not very sure whether I've already got the communication. I am stepping down from being the focal person. There are two other guys who have been nominated to take up the baton, but I'm hoping that I will be close by to give guidance should there be a need. I'm not very sure whether this is the right platform, but I'm just wanted to say that I've been given more responsibilities, which I think can compromise the work of the GF of the GSP.
Thanks for that. Maybe you can send me an email. You can send me an email so I can take note of the new people. So I can ask you to send me an email so I can take note of the change and the new persons that are appointed. And
okay,
again,
thanks. We'll do that.
Thanks a lot. I see that Pierre is putting some extra links in the chat, so you can find additional information there. Again, consider that GEF is a very good opportunity to finance projects in your country. As Cruz mentioned, these activities, the project can really link a lot to sustainable soil management, and the Global Soil Partnership has so many tools you may include or you can cooperate with that can be included in the project, from the mapping side to the role of soil laboratories, including the activities on assessing the impact of sustainable soil management to the protocols, and the use of indicators. So please, in case in the phase of formulation of the projects, please do not hesitate also to come back to us in order to receive inputs or suggestions on how to, let's say, make your proposal as much holistic as possible. I'm going to the chat again. Yes, indeed, Edward. We are part of the Solar Initiative for Africa. We are cooperating with other groups, and we will share with you additional activities, especially during the African Soil Partnership annual meeting soon, about the updates on the African Soil Initiative and the African Summit. So thanks for pointing out. We will we are trying to take part in that, and we will update you very soon on that during annual meeting. So, well, if there is no additional need for clarifications or there is no additional question from the audience, I would like to thank again Cruz. Thank you a lot, Pierre, who was with us. Thanks a lot for providing us this nice and clear overview of the process for application of formulating the project. We are just 7 minutes out of the agenda, which is good, I guess. Again, I will upload the recording and the presentation on the African webpage, African Soil Partnership webpage, so you can go through the material again. Thanks again for joining. We will try to organize something again in French, hopefully, and a session for the colleagues from the Portuguese-speaking country of the region. Thanks again. Me and the chair and the vice chairs of the African Soil Partnership will follow up again soon with you, also regarding the annual meeting of the African Soil Partnership. I don't know if you, Pierre, Cruz, or even Anne, chair of the African Soil Partnership, have any closing remarks. Otherwise, we can close the meeting.
Thank you. No, just looking forward, and please do reach out for any clarification. We are always available. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Speaker, so much for so much information. I think we were a bit overwhelmed, but it's really, really informative, and we shall follow up with the country focal points in the GEF. Thank you so much for organizing this and all this useful information. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, then. Have a nice
Thank you
day.
very much.
Have a nice
Thank
day.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.